to the Indiana History Project. I'm your host, Norm Taylor. Good having you along with us today. You know, this is I have fun doing the programs, and I have fun doing the research for the programs, and I enjoy, you know, all of our guests that we have on the programs, but some programs are just a lot of fun. This is one of those programs that's been a lot of fun for me, and I think for my guests. And I know it's going to be one of the programs that you are going to enjoy. That's going to be a program that is going to hopefully get your historic preservation spirit and blood flowing in you, because this is a great topic that we're going to deal with today. I just want to say thank you for all the people out there that have been watching the Indiana History Project. I want to say a special friend to a person I just met that watches the show every single week. Paul, you know who I'm talking about. Paul, thank you for watching and watching every week of the Indiana History Project, for your kind comments. For so many of you out there that just do a great job of encouraging us and of sending in material, and you've given me enough material for a lifetime already that I need to research. But thank you for all those that follow the Indiana History Project. Remember, you can like the Indiana History Project on Facebook, as well as the Indiana Talent Project, and you can keep up with all the happenings before the shows even hit, future shows, all the information, like Indiana History Project on Facebook and the Indiana Talent Project. That'll keep you up to date. At one time, massive herds of buffalo went through our state. And I know when you think of buffalo herds, you think of the ones out west. But right here in our state, at one time, massive herds was all over our state. And it's hard to imagine today, but they left behind traces. And that's going to be part of what our show is going to be talking about today, the buffalo traces that we found in Lawrence County. And yes, there were buffalo by the herds, by the thousands, that have traveled through our great state, and they left the highway, and we know they were there by finding these traces. It's been a fascinating journey already in finding the buffalo traces of Lawrence County. My guest with me will not be a stranger to us, because you've been on for how many? You've been on for so many programs, Tom. Every time that I have something to do with VOCA, you've been right on. I don't even know how many shows you've been on, but you've been on. They think you're the host of this show. I think you've been on so many times.
Not really, Norm. Not the host, but I know how to get here. I know how to get here.
You've been on a lot of times. You know, yeah. I think the last time you was with me was on the Reed Station shows that we had.
At the Reed Station, and then we talked about a VOCA once, I think, and so I think this is my third time here.
Okay, all right. Well, and you'll be on again, I know, because people enjoy. They say, boy, we like when that Tom Kirkman's on there. You just drive up the ratings. Well, it must be the stellar good looks that you have, Tom.
It's the looks. It's not the information.
Okay. Well, the Reed Station shows were really popular, and it was really, and since then, I've been sent pictures. In fact, I've talked with the grandson of John Minnow. Actually, I guess, and his dad, the son of John Minnow, that had the stores there in Reed Station, he lived to be about 100 or a little over 100 years old. So he had a pretty good memory of Reed Station, and they sent, from his memory, sent me a picture of what he made, and this is something that really sparked an interest in with people. So there's a lot of history out there, Tom, that I just feel like as we're getting older, we're running out of time. There's so much I want to get done. There's so much I want to see done. You ever feel that way?
I have to get up early every morning. I just can't wait to get out of bed and get going. It's there. You got to get it down somehow, one way or the other.
Well, there is a lot to do, and you've been very instrumental in helping with this. When I talk about the buffalo traces, and this is going to be a surprise already, because I've already had people even before this is taped to say, well, I didn't even know buffalo came through this area. I didn't know that there were these buffalo traces in the county, and it's something that I haven't explored too closely until just recently myself. But there was a lot of history that was involved with the buffalo trace once you were looking at it, because this was the early roads. These were the early highways for the pioneers to come through. Isn't that correct, Tom?
That's true. coming through the mountains through the Cumberland Gap. That was a trace, a buffalo trace, and then all the old wilderness road to come on up through Kentucky and what have you, up to the falls. Quite a trace. And then you pick up at the falls. The buffalo, they would once they got to a river or stream, they swam that place. So they left the falls. They could go on head west towards Vincennes, which was the old Vincennes trace is a very, very worn trace, and it's visible almost all the way from Vincennes to Louisville. Yeah. And then you have from the north and south trace, it's called the Yellow Banks, and it runs up, comes up to the West Fork of White River, up to Freedom and up that way. And that was used quite a bit. General Harrison, I think, took that trace on north when they went up to Canada, and they're just.
There's a lot of history involved there.
Yes.
The trace that you're talking about, the one that is mapped out between Vincennes and Louisville, is one that kind of got my interest going in the traces. And I just kind of did a brief search there, and I found that just some of the history involved with that trace, because Native Americans would have been going on that trace, so it would have been a tribe by our tribes. The tribes would have been going along that trace, obviously. But I found out in 1786, George Rogers Clark marched 100 men to Fort Sackville at Vincennes over the Buffalo Trace. So that's a pretty historic thing right there. It was the first western mail route carried weekly by 2 men traveling the 130 miles on foot. It was over that trace. In 1804, it became an Indian treaty line. In 1807, a British spy believed to be conferring with the Indians before the Battle of Tippecanoe was captured on the trail. In 1812, it was considered so important that the mounted troops of the Rangers began patrolling the trace to protect the travelers. 1819, one tavern owner along the route documented more than 5,000 travelers en route to Missouri. That's fascinated me. And by 1820, the first stagecoach line was established to run the length of the trace from New Albany to Vincennes. So just there, look at all the history along that trace of the Vincennes and to the Louisville route, following the massive herds of buffalo that one time went through there.
It's an amazing thing, and each trace has its own story. You've just given the story of the Vincennes trace. The Yellow Trace has its own. The Cincinnati Trace has its own. The old Vincennes Road that goes through Orleans, in just our next county down, has quite a history itself through Huron and that direction. The traces are extremely fascinating.
Didn't you tell me, Tom, that you mentioned that about the cabins, and I want to do a future program on this, but the cabins that were built along the traces? I'm going
to, we'll step back beyond the cabins before the white man got here, brought the cabin, but we hear a lot about little mounds along the river. Guys like to go out and dig up these mounds and get things and what have you. But really, the traces have so much Indian history on them that everybody has forgotten. They don't think about traces anymore. But that was their way of traveling from river to river or what have you. But again, I'm pushing traces pretty hard today.
Yeah, we are, and we should, because this is something that should be preserved. Because Tom and I, and we're going to get to that just in a minute, but Tom and I spent a Sunday in which we went looking for some of these traces, and we just spent a few hours, and we found a few traces, and we're going to have pictures of that a little bit later. But Tom, didn't you mention to me that somewhere along your study of this, that you found out that the herds may have extended about 35 miles long?
They're estimated at 35 miles, yes, and that would be a distance from Bedford, Indiana, to Seymour, Indiana.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Just a continuous line. And traveling these hoofs, buffalo has smaller hoofs than a cow, and they could trample down things. One fascinating thing I bumped into one time was they were running water lines, and this was up by Freedom, Indiana, and they were cutting across a buffalo trace. Well, as the buffaloes progressed through over and over, their dung would change the color of this soil. And when they were cutting through the trace for the water line, you come down this yellow or orange clay, and then all of a sudden you hit this rich, fertile black dirt, throwed up and then out of the trace, and it's over with. But it was just, that was the first cross section of a trace I had experienced. I thought that was, fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But they vegetation was sparse in these traces, and even today you don't see any big timber down inside the trace. They'll be up on the banks of the trace, but it's just packed so tight that it's hard for vegetation to grow. And if you Google map a little bit, if you like to, you can follow these traces pretty well. You have to realize what you're looking at, and your eyes get accustomed to traces. But it's a good way to map out things.
Right. Now, Tom, how did you get interested in did you stumble upon this interest of the buffalo traces? I mean, I can say that a lot of these people that are going to watching this, they're going to say, I didn't even know buffalo roamed in this county here, but they did. And now that I've seen the traces, we had huge herds that came through this county.
Yeah. Well, in my early days, I was a map maker for a geological survey, and then also with the Army. But I was always interested in maps. And one day, just out looking around, following maps, I happened on these indentations, and it took me a while to figure out what they were. Then get to looking, these were roads, these were highways, and oftentimes in the hill country, they would be overlapped by our own county roads, but out in flat areas where they would cut across the grid system, the congressional lines, and what have you. But it was through map making that I got interested in the traces, and they, as far as I knew at that time, they had never been mapped. But and I've forgotten the guy's name now, but he produced a map that had a few of the major traces on it, but nothing like an instance map of Lawrence County or something. But that's basically how I got involved in the maps and the tracing of the traces.
So you have spent time then identifying then traces throughout a large part of the county then?
Probably 40 years. I imagine
about 40 years you've been.
I imagine I've looked for them, yeah.
Yeah, well, in that period of time, then you know quite a bit. Now, in our Sunday afternoon travel, I know that we just looked through a very small part of where the traces that are here in the county.
I think you and I went out towards Popcorn, out to the northwest part of the county.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, we confined it to that. But each part of the county has its own bunch of traces, and how they connect and what have you is quite fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And where they go and what they do. It's just,
going back into last Sunday, whenever we spent some time there, and we were in the Popcorn area, the Spencer, and we've got pictures that's going to show of us, and so the pictures that you're seeing actually are pictures that we took of actual traces. So now it's going to look like just woods maybe to some of you that are looking at this, but we were actually looking at buffalo traces. And the areas that we were at on this Sunday was basically in the Springville area. But they were also, in the Spencer Pike, going down the Spencer Pike, the Popcorn area, Springville Fayetteville Road was another one that you said that kind of follows what the buffalo trace, right?
Yes, in fact, that trace leaving Springville going to Fayetteville, and then it leaves Fayetteville and goes on down to Coxton, down towards White River, and then it crosses White River there at the ferry. I forgot the name of the ferry there, but it comes up Woods Ferry.
Woods Ferry.
Yeah, and then it comes up there by 50 and 37 where they intersect, and then goes on down to Springville, and then through the park that way through Mitchell, and then on down to the falls down to Louisville, and it's quite an interesting trace.
Was there actually ever, were you aware of any trace that actually run through in the property now that is currently Spring Mill State Park?
There's, when I put the maps together, I think there's 2 or 3 traces that actually go through right where the big springs are and where the village itself might be.
Okay.
And so, but we'll get that pinpointed here maybe we map it out.
Yeah, maybe we can map it out. This is only going to be a beginning project. I have a feeling I know the people that watch my program, and they're going to find this fascinating. And they're going to say, okay, yeah, we need to get this thing developed. Because there's going to be people say, I want to go see some of these traces, and so we can be working on this then, putting together a map so that maybe for the future people will be able to go and to see some of these areas. And this is a project. Let me know out there, folks, if you think this would be interesting. I know you will, but this would be something that the people need to realize, and this needs to be preserved and protected. These places where actually you can go see now. Whenever we do this, some of this is on private property, so you know, be aware of that, be sensitive to that, and don't go on anybody's property that you're not allowed to. There's no trespassing issues here, but actually some of the places that you and I went to, you know, you could just pull off the side of the road and you could just look at the traces, and you're not actually looking on other people's property. But you know, be aware of that. But there'll be some of these places, and once you start developing an eye for it, then you can start seeing some of this.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where they're identifiable. Just if you learn to distinguish between a maple tree and a hickory tree, you're able to distinguish between this trace and the county road grader.
Yeah.
It's
Tom, along these a lot of these main roads, you mentioned the 50-37 intersection. So how would that trace, did some of the old 37 or did any of that follow the trace at all, or 50, Highway 50?
Yeah, basically old 37 follows, it goes pretty well straight south, and it crosses the river down around Alton and Fredonia, in that area there, where they come across the river there, and then it comes pretty well due north, and then but they intersect back and forth. Most traces, if you find one, there's going to be one next to it, either higher on the hillside or lower.
Now, why would they have split up like that? Why would some taken a higher route and some a lower route?
The first group that went through, they would have taken all the vegetation. So the next group, I'd say it had to do mainly with appetite.
Okay, looking for foraging for food. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then, but they would usually always come back together at a mud waller or a sulfur spring or something like that. Just west of here is a little town called Trinity Springs. It's over in Martin County. Well, there's a lot of traces that meander and go to that sulfur spring just to get the salt and what have you. And it's the same way through Avoca. There's a sulfur spring there, and it has been covered up because of the flood waters and what have you. But at one time it was open, and it was right along the trace.
So right there, you showed me where Sulphur Spring was at in Avoca. So at one time, then the buffalo would have visited that spring right there.
And about the only place to see the trace that goes through Avoca, where you can see its indentations in the earth, is right on the southwest corner of the post office. They built the post office right in the middle of the trace, but there's still a little bit of swag, and I'll point that out to you.
At Avoca. Yeah. That was built right on the middle of a trace?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And but that's the one that runs over to Springville, and then from Springville on up to Terre Haute, and that way.
Yeah. At one time, and I don't know how well you can see this map. I just got this off the internet, but at one time, this kind of gives you an idea of the darkened area here is where at one time the range of the buffalo, which covers most of the United States here. When you look at this map, I mean, they were all over the place.
Yeah.
Here, we just can't imagine the magnitude of these herds. But then by 1889, you see that it's pretty well reduced then out into the western part as man started coming in there then. In your studies of this, the Native Americans would have followed the herds. They would set up the villages, like say the Delaware would have been, of course, familiar with the buffalo herds. But scavengers would have, and also hunters of the buffalo, the mountain lions, wolves, and I guess everything at one time would have been following these massive herds. Yep. It would have been something to see. What about, would there have been places that actually at one time that you would have found buffalo bones along this?
I understand, and I don't recall where I read it, but in one of the histories, whether it was their county history or whatever. But at French Lick, of course, there's the huge trace that goes through French Lick and Paola over to Vincennes. But they say at French Lick, at the springs there, that the bones were at least 9 feet deep, just the bones themselves, and that would take a lot of buffalo through the year to got stuck in the wallows or what have you. But,
right.
I myself cannot imagine that kind of a thing, but it gives you an idea of just in that one area how many buffalo or bison, whatever the proper name is.
Bison, I guess, is a proper name for it. Tom, what about, you had mentioned to me too when we were out on our day out that cabins, the cabins would have been built alongside there, and there are still remnants of some of these cabins, maybe perhaps foundations there.
It was just a natural thing to build it, because the traces were not only a way to travel, but that was communications. In other words, you could build off the trace, and you may go years and not see anyone. But if you build up near the trace, of course there was some danger in that, but also you were treated to the daily news of whoever might be passing by. And like you pointed out there a while ago, it was 5,000 people that traveled it on that.
Right.
Well, that's a lot of, to
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you can gather a lot of information that way. And people were then, like they are now, they would like news from the home place and what have you. But yeah, there's about every trace you can spot. The easiest way to spot it where an old homestead was or an old log house was, daffodils this time of year.
Yeah, yes, I know what you're talking about.
There are different ways, but you pick up different types of patterns to look for. In fact, I lived most of my life looking for patterns, and they disclose so many things that the person wouldn't think to look for.
Now, people are going to ask why daffodils.
Yeah, but they'll bring or there might be bring a pine tree from North Carolina. If you find an old pine tree, why? It probably didn't start here. It probably started in North Carolina. Someone they brought it up there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Different thing. But then you locate there'd be a cornerstone or something where the log would sit, and then also a cistern. They always had to have water. If when there was spring, well, there would always be a cistern nearby, and that is one thing I watch closely for is out looking at these places. If the brush has fallen over the cistern, you can take a quick fall into some water there if you don't want to. But yeah. So it's exciting to keep
these traces, Tom, would have had when the buffalo herds came through. They would have had to have a water source pretty close by when you're talking about the magnitude of these herds.
That is true. The trace between Louisville and Vincennes. You mentioned the militia there patrolling it. Well, they had a station every 20 mile. Well, that 20 mile was a good distance to travel in one day. And same way with the buffalo. They didn't go too far until they crossed the stream, or in other words, it was like a beeline from crossing the East Fork of White River going to the West Fork of White River. It's just like shooting an arrow across it. But they didn't travel too far away from water. And if it's
there would also, when we're talking about the history of the traces, Tom, there would have been battles, skirmishes that would happen along those traces too. That if you would now that you start thinking about this, because again you have the clashes of the two cultures with the Native American culture, the First Nations, and the white pioneers coming in. In fact, I just read recently the Battle of White River, which is not a well-known, is a skirmish pretty much, but it was where the Delaware, attacked some white pioneers coming in. So you would have that element too, even because you have the two cultures beginning to clash along these traces.
That's true. There was a large Delaware village down towards Petersburg that where the east and west forks of White River come together, set in between those two. But also you had aside from the two rivers, you had the yellow trace that came not too far from there, and also the Vincennes trace that went through Hallsville and over towards Peter. But east-west traces and northwest, plus the rivers. So that village, Delaware Village, was situated in a really like Indianapolis would be today. You had all the interstates coming through there, and then out east of here, over towards Salem, there was a small Delaware village, but they were spotted around in this area, and most often they were. That's where the trace was. The trace was important to them because they could hear the buffalo herds coming.
I was going to ask you this what would it have been like to actually to hear one of these massive herds coming? It would have been almost deafening, wouldn't it, when they've been passing through?
I've tried to describe that. A lot of times if they made the noise of the bulls making their noise, the calves are making their noise, the cows are making their noise, trying to keep up the calf. But there's all kinds of language going back and forth. And then just if you were in a tree looking down on that, it would just be an undulating sea of fur as it goes by. One can't really imagine what it would really be like.
You would have been able to hear them even when they were miles away approaching.
That ground thumping of thousands and thousands of hoofs, and it would have been something, really would.
It's just hard to imagine that right here in this county, folks, at one time, if we'd have lived in this era, that we would have heard these just huge herds of buffalo coming right through this county here. It's amazing to me.
And they were so important to the life of the natives. Clothing and shelter from the weather and what have you. But at each time as a herd would pass through, well, they would take what they could from what they needed from that herd.
So if you were doing a Native American search of possible camping or villages, a good place to, I guess, look would be along the traces.
Along the traces. Then also along those traces, like you mentioned a while ago, you'd have the cougar stretched out on a limb above there, waiting on. They were not. They were ambushers. They didn't stalk their prey. They more or less waited till it come by. But there was a lot of things going on these traces other than the buffalo. But the buffalo was the important thing.
They would have had ample opportunity once that they would, and I would assume that these animals, these predators, would have about known whenever these massive herds were going to come through. They would have probably had an idea of that, wouldn't they? Tom, on when would these herds? I assume that the herds, when we're thinking about the trace between Louisville and Vincennes, maybe heading toward the prairies of Illinois. Would that be about right? I mean, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, no, that's true. Oftentimes they would go all the way across the mountains. I mean, go through like the Cumberland Gap. They'd go on the other side to winter, and then springtime. As soon as the vegetation started, now it wouldn't be any good to travel now because there's nothing to eat other than that. But they. As the summer progressed, well, they would come through here on the way to Illinois. Illinois was pretty well covered with, and the prairies were with the bison, and then across to Illinois, you go all the way to, like say, Joplin, Missouri, or I forgot now what was the town that George Rogers Clark began with a K? Whatever it was, but anyway, it'd be a trace from Vincennes over to that town on the Mississippi. But it was the super highways of the day. And it provided the things that our super highways provided today. It was food. But
there weren't any McDonald's.
Yeah,
there were no bison McDonald's.
No, that was the only thing missing was that big arch.
Okay. When would the herds begin their migration?
Pardon me?
When would the herds have begun the migration?
I'd say probably by the 1st of May they were coming across the mountains. They were coming into Kentucky, I would say.
About the 1st of May?
I would say, it'd be my guess, because the vegetation would have started down there.
And where would these herds have wintered?
There again, they would have gone back, made the trip west, come back east. They were going to the other side of the mountains, which usually was in North Carolina, unless you're in the mountains, it doesn't get too cold. Virginia don't get too cold, but they'd get on the East Coast with that. where the weather was a little warmer and the vegetation was still available.
And they traveled this migratory pattern for
thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Probably started as soon as dinosaurs left.
Well, yeah, it may have.
Yeah,
I mean, but so it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
so when you think, when we look at these traces, Tom, that you and I had this opportunity to take a look at, you're talking about hundreds or thousands of years. I mean, of the buffaloes traveling this, that still, to this day here in 2012, or is this 2012? I think it is. Yeah, I keep forgetting. Yeah,
they go by quick, don't they?
Yeah, it does. I get my years. I deal so much history that I give it the current year miss. That 2012 here, that you can still see a trace of these massive buffalo herds that happened 100 years ago. Do you have a kind of an idea just in your mind about when this would have actually started to stop, these herds? About what years?
Yeah, I don't. I just never stopped to put a beginning and ending to it. It's just to me, it has been a continuum since the only thing that really has hurt it is the bulldozer. It's destroying a lot of them now.
Yes, it is.
But the beginning of it, I just...
Yeah, we can do some more research on that. Like map I saw was actually by 1889, it had already been pushed into the western part. There was just small herds then, and then of course, during the Indian Wars, in order to hurt the Native American population, of course, there was just a mass slaughter of that century of buffalo and precedented. But when white men started coming through this area, it started sure changing the way of life for a lot of things, the animals and the Native Americans.
Yes, it did. Had it not been for the traces, I don't think settlement of the Northwest Territory, I don't think it would hardly been possible. I think it'd been more people lost than could have been found.
You know, Tom, it was just a treat for me, my first time out west and going into South Dakota. And now I've made that trip a few times, but the first time I got to see a buffalo herd, it stopped me in my tracks. And and getting to view buffalo up close, my wife and I, we actually stayed still. We actually was in the middle of a herd. It was just one of the most amazing things in my life as they came toward us and they round us, and it was just fantastic. They are beautiful, powerful, magnificent creatures.
They are indeed.
And it's just amazing to see them and to see the power of one of them and how quick, fast, and powerful they are. It's something that huge. But the skill of the Native Americans to be able to bring one of them down, boy, it would have been quite a feat. I'm afraid I couldn't do that, even with something that large. Well, they knew what they were doing.
Their approach to them was kind of like it was predatory, really.
Yeah.
They could hide in the tree or behind the tree.
Yes.
If it had been me, it'd been in the tree.
I agree with that. Well, Tom, also, and we're touching on the subject, Tom is also an author of a book called Once Upon a Hide. And Tom, I've started reading this book. I'm not finished with it. You just gave it to me, but I've started reading, and it's one of those books that is hard for me to put down. I enjoy reading about this, but we're going to tell people how they can get a hold of this book, because you're going to be wanting to find, especially if you're interested in the subject we're talking about today with the buffalo traces. You have a lot to do with this, at least in the part that I'm reading so far about the buffalo herds coming through. But tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, this book, I call it a love story. It's a historical novel. But what I've done was taken a time period between the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So that'd be 200 years old this year, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Good timing.
And that's older than us.
Yeah. Anyway, it has to do with a young man leaving North Carolina and coming up into the Northwest Territory, and bumping into or having an accident over near where the Muscatatuck River and White River join, just to the east of us here from Bedford. Mm-hmm. And so it all takes place from around this area here and what have you. But we get involved in different things. For example, the title of the book, Once Upon a Hide. The hide is kind of a little theme that stays all the way through the book, and it has to do with the buffalo hide, how the buffalo hide was taken and who it was given to and what have you. And but then there's different levels of things going on. I talk or imply what was going on with, say for example, political greed. The War of 1812 really had to do with the beaver pelt. Well, you get thinking of, you had the English wanting all the money out of it, the French wanting all the money out of it, we were wanting all the money out of it. In the end, they were wanting their share too. But so it all had to do with the politics and the greed of that time, and then also this little love story of this young man from North Carolina bumping into an Indian maiden here in the Northwest, and how they became attached, and then how through the years they became separated because of this war, and what it meant to be separated, how to have the family unit torn apart, and how the family unit worked day and night trying to recover their loss, and what have you. And then the political events that go on, like the Harrison going to Canada and taking care of Tecumseh and this and that.
Yeah.
I try to include some, historical events, but it's not a historical book. It's a novel.
Yeah. What made you want to start a book like this?
Buffalo Traces. It really.
That's because of Buffalo Traces.
Yeah, because everything, Buffalo Traces and genealogy. How did my folks get here? Well, they couldn't. They said, well, Daniel Boone went ahead and cut down and made him a path to get here. Well, Daniel Boone was just following the Buffalo Trace. He didn't cut no path, but.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
So anyway,
the Buffalo were here before Daniel Boone.
Yes,
Yeah.
And so it just one thing on top of another. Genealogy, history of my life's work, this and that, and really my love, just to be able to look and see where I've been or where I'm at. That's a daily chore for me, is to be aware of the blessings I live under.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. Every day I'm excited.
Whenever I've read it so far, and I haven't read all the book, but I see certainly the romance part, so there's going to be a little of that for anybody the ladies. You just know a little bit about everything. I consult you on so much on history. I guess matters of the heart and matters of dealing with my wife. You can just instruct me then on how that's done, right?
Yep.
Because there's definitely the romantic interest. But there's also the historic part. You describe well the southern Indiana part, that the Northwest Territory. You must have a love for the Northwest Territory.
It's a beautiful place, and it has been for years. Now, I'll give you a kind of an idea how it was then and how it is now. I love to fish. I'm always armed with at least 2 fishing poles, but fishing, it's governed by what we have now is called the Department of Natural Resources. They didn't have that in 1812. Okay, these people, these Indians, natives, they were dependent on that river for fish. So they had 2 things. They had what we would call a live box and a fish trap. The fish trap they would keep out all the time, and then they would go through that trap, pick out what fish they wanted to smoke for the winter meat, put it in the live box, put the trap back in, throw the ones that were the wrong size, put them back in the river, let them mature. But everything, the Yadkin River in North Carolina had a series of hooks that goes out in the water that took care of the fish. They didn't have to put out traps. They just go get what fish they wanted. But we have taken all those hooks out of that river and got the river all messed up now, so there ain't hardly any fish growing.
Yeah.
But I was just giving an example of how I work all day with my 2 fishing poles, and they could just go get to what fish they wanted. No program of any kind.
Reading your book, Once Upon a Hide, again, I've only read a portion of it, but you make reference to a person waking up in the morning, the birds in their ritual in the morning, they're singing, that kind of greets the day. I've noticed that already a couple times in there, but the part of nature that you're certainly bringing that out because you're descriptive of the woods. You're descriptive of the animals, the interaction between humans and nature.
Yeah.
Now, this must be something that's pretty dear to you too.
I don't know. I've always had a love and a fondness for the woods and for what goes on there. My grandpa, he always had a saying that don't go in the woods unless you can call all the trees by their first name. So we spent a lot of time learning to see a tree, whether it was a hard maple, soft maple, or just a red maple, whatever maple it was. Same with the oaks. But the woods always had a fascinating thing, and I try to think when I'm writing. Well, for example, the buffalo trace. You can say, well, the buffalo trace, it's an indentation in the earth where the buffaloes walk. But there are things that go on there. The smell, the rain on fresh buffalo manure. What would it smell like? But that would be something you would have to experience if you were going to experience the buffalo trace at that time. See? So I try to think of things like that, and I'd say things that I overlook. I'm going to mention now if you don't mind,
you go ahead.
the lady that took the photograph for
Yes.
this book.
Yeah, let's show that. That's a friend of yours?
Both the lady that took the photograph and the model that's they're on the cover. Shaylin Welp, W-E-L-P, was the photographer. She's down in around Du Bois. Probably one of the best photographers I've seen in recent years. I've always was always a fan of Ansel Adams, and I love good photography. And this lady, I think, has the potential of being in the top rank one of these days.
Yeah.
And the lady on the cover, she has been a long-time friend of mine, and was we have talked about. She enjoys the same type of thing that I do in the experiences that the woods offers and what have you, and oftentimes pointed out the dew on the spider webs where the sunlight was glistening on it, this and things. It was very pointed in pointing out things that perhaps I might miss, overlook. And so,
Yeah.
But she was very helpful in the book, and I appreciated it very much. And but it was quite an experience. I enjoyed writing the book. I really did.
Yeah, the name of the young Native American maiden was taken from a letter from your granddaughters. Was I read that?
Yeah, my middle son had 3 daughters, Molly and Johanna and Laura, and I took the first 2 letters of each of their names.
Oh, okay.
M-O.
That's how you came up with her.
Laura, L-A, and Johanna, so it comes in Mojo. I had no idea what an Indian name would be. I still don't. but,
okay.
But I thought that might be an
that's
Indian,
creative, Tom.
That might be
That's
an
creative.
Indian name, yeah.
Tom, you know, there's a lot of things you're interested in, and like we have made mention of, it just seems like that there's not enough time, because every time we discover something, even in our journey there, when we started talking about William Clark, the brother of George Rogers Clark, and how the daughter was buried here in Lawrence County, and when we went looking there, and then we went to some old cemeteries and look at some of these places. Every time I go on one of these rabbit hunts and I start finding something, then I find another trail to go off on, and that's the way it is, isn't it? I mean, it's just that there is so much just right here in our own area to find and discover.
There's more to life than Walmart.
There is, certainly. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
And I've loved to live that life.
Yeah. Would you have liked to have lived back in the era you're talking about, you're writing about?
Yeah, I believe I would have. I would have enjoyed it, I think. I really don't know. I appreciate what we've got today. I really do. I appreciate recently the medical help I've received, and I wouldn't have been able to have that then. Then also, I don't know, one of the things about this book that triggered me was the group called the Moravians came down the White River here.
Yeah, that's a fascinating part myself.
In 1803, and they kept a diary. Well, this diary was, I don't know if it still is, was over at our library, and it's written in the old style German, Frachter. And I spent a lot of time learning that alphabet, how to write it and what have you. And one of my projects I have before I leave this earth is to translate that diary they left here and get it into English. I think it would be fascinating how they would describe, see how close they would describe then as what I'm thinking I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So, but that's one thing I want to do one of these days.
Yeah.
And,
would they have been one of the earlier ones to bring Christianity into the area then?
that was their objective, was to bring Christianity to the well, they would call the heathen folks,
Yeah.
the Native Americans, and they were successful in that. In sometime, and I think in some of the massacres and battles and what have you, I think one of the tragedies of that type of thing was one of the little villages that the Moravians had set up of Christian Native Americans. Somehow or another, we were managed to slaughter them all. So
Yeah.
that was over in Ohio. But
That's another story.
that's another story.
That's right. Tom, if someone would like to order this book, how can we obtain it?
Go to Amazon, and then they'll
You can
fix it
purchase right through Amazon.
You can purchase it through Amazon. And hopefully, what I intend to do is I'll get enough to hang around home, and then maybe we can just do it by hand to hand rather than electronically.
Oh, okay.
But in an event, Amazon will be more than happy to send you a copy. You send them some money, I guess. That's the way it runs.
Yeah, I think that's how it works there. So you can get them through Amazon. Perhaps one of these days, we're kind of working on a night this summer where people have asked me about this, of having a time where the guests have been on my show over the years for the Indiana History Project, where a time where we can come and meet some, I guess. And I'm kind of working on something like that. So maybe something like that, where maybe if they get a book, maybe you would sign it for them. You think?
You bet.
If we get something like that? No,
Yeah,
okay.
the name Tom is not too hard to spell.
No, even I can do that.
Yeah, so I'll sign it for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you can get this book off of Amazon, and it is a good read. I'll have this read here pretty quick, but it's an excellent read, and it just really endears yourself to our southern Indiana, and it's about the area right around here, so you're going to find it a fascinating read.
I think it's about us. That's what it is.
Yeah, it really is. Tom, I know the people are going to think, wow, this has been an interesting show. Well, at least I hope you're thinking that. Not only about the book, but about the Buffalo Traces. And folks, let me know if you think that this is something we need to pursue. And I'm going to pursue it. I know Tom is, and I will, on the Buffalo Traces, and make this more available to you people that have an interest in this. But let me know out there. Email me, or let me know on the Indiana History Project on Facebook. Phone me, however you want to do that, and say, yeah, I'd like to find where some of these traces are at, and I'm interested in this as well. And we're going to see what we can do about preserving this for our history. That's what this show is all about. It's about preserving our history, because someday these traces, Tom, there won't be a trace of these traces.
No.
And someday they'll all be gone. So that we need to preserve now, so that our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, can someday come and see with their own eyes, come and touch, come and walk on the places that at one time massive buffalo herds, when they roamed through our county. We need to not only be able to tell the story of it, but we need to be able to see it. Our grandchildren need to see it. Long after we're gone, we need to preserve where these great herds one time roamed and influence our history of Indiana. This has been the Indiana History Project. I have my guest Tom Kirkman. Be sure to order his book. Be sure to get a hold of us about the program we've been talking about today. I'm your host, Norm Taylor. Anything else before I leave?
Before we leave, I failed to mention this lady's name was Miss Barbara Benton.
Barbara Denton.
Barbara Denton, D-E-N-T-O-N.
Barbara Denton, okay.
And also, Norm, I get an appreciation of these traces. Without them, I don't think the Northwest Territory would have looked like it is today.
I think you're bringing a very strong point on that, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. We'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah.